All right, so here is the update. I didn't think I was gonna have enough time to make videos this semester. I had hoped that I would have enough time, but with my different courses and different labs, I just haven't had much time. However, I am now forced to make time for this project because my Book of Mormon course wants me to make a project for the course themed around, the Book of Mormon has to be the theme of the project. And so this podcast is going to do that. We're going to, shift gears. And I hope my professor likes it. I think a lot of you are gonna like it, and I hope my professor likes it. So let's just jump right into it. The Book of Mormon. As a faithful Latter-day Saint, the Book of Mormon, of course, is we consider that to be the keystone of our religion. It's the thing that really is the evidence that we provide that Joseph Smith is a prophet. Um, and a lot of people have said, apostles have said, you kind of have to go around, over, underneath the Book of Mormon to really dismantle our faith. But in my opinion, that's a really hard thing to do. It's an extremely hard thing to do because the Book of Mormon is so profound. And here's the thing, if you read the Book of Mormon the first time, it's a new document. It's fresh, and depending on the level of education you have and how much you've read, I mean, really, the more you read, the more you're able to connect with the Book of Mormon. And I think in that sense, that's why it's such a sacred book because it's always relevant. You read more and more, you learn more and more, and then you read the Book of Mormon again, and then new things speak to you. And I think that's what makes it such an amazing and a miraculous book. Um, and that has definitely been the case. With my experience with the Book of Mormon, is every time I've reread it, new things speak to me. And so I kind of want to share some of those things that the Book of Mormon, has some of the insights that it's given me. And in order to understand these insights, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. So one, I'm a psychology major at BYU, and two, I'm minoring in philosophy. And so I read some philosophical texts. I read a lot of psychology, a lot of papers, and so that really informs kind of how I see the world. It helps me make sense of what I see around me. And so when I look at the Book of Mormon through those lenses, a lot of things start to speak to me. So one of the first things that really jumped out at me when I read the Book of Mormon most recently was that it's set in 600 BC. Now that 600 BC is a very important time period. From 600 BC to about 400 BC, that's what you call the Axial Age or the Axial Revolution. And it's during this time that people's worldview started to shift, not just in one specific region, but around the world. So, for example, all the major religions today, most of them, I think the exception here would be Islam, um, but but even then, Islam is kind of related, and Christianity, of course, that doesn't count because Christ didn't arrive till year zero, but but Judaism started to make major changes in how it viewed the world. And around that same time, Greek philosophy was coming about as well. So you get people like Plato and Aristotle, Taoism, and Confucius. Um, they start to become popular in Asia, and that philosophy starts to emerge. And then, and then uh, not so far east, but a bit more west, the Buddha also arrives on the scene. And so all these different religions are coming out right at this time period in this axial age. And the Book of Mormon says, hey, I'm in here too. And it puts that stake in the ground right there in the axial age. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I think the first person to point this out was Hugh Nibley. He connected these dots and he said, hey, the Book of Mormon, it's like begging to be taken seriously because it comes out at this pivotal point in human history. And so yeah, that's one, for me, that's one reason to take it really seriously. I don't think it's a coincidence that book is set at that time. Um, excuse me. And so, what does that mean then for Latter Day Saints? Well, I think Latter Day Saints have the benefit of one, we're a bit more open-minded, I think, than maybe other theological systems because Joseph Smith, that guy was, an eclectic type of person. He read everything, and anything he could get his hands on, he would read it. So if Terrell Givens, for example, he's trying to recreate Joseph Smith's library, and he's saying, hey, man, Joseph Smith had books from different religions, different preachers, different denominations, and he didn't really discriminate. Um, and so, one of the tenets of the LDS faith is that, wherever truth is found, we want it. We accept it. It doesn't matter if it comes from within the Book of Mormon or outside of the Book of Mormon or outside of the Christian canon. If it's true, we're down for it. So I think we can give ourselves license to then explore these other religious systems that are emerging in the Axial Age. And I mean, we do this already to a degree. I mean, Greek philosophy is a foundational pillar in our American culture. BYU, the Lord's University, has a philosophy department, and if you were to take a philosophy 101 course, you would talk about the ancient Greeks, and if you were to minor or major in philosophy, you'd go from them all the way up to modern uh, philosophical figures, and of course you would go over logic and all that stuff, logic, metaphysics, ethics, all that stuff was being discussed during the Axial Age, and so we can definitely borrow from them, and that's okay. It's not now, of course, not always will Greek ideas harmonize or will mesh well with LDS ideas, but some of them do, and then of course some of them don't. We have to be logical and systematic about what we accept and what we don't, and that's okay. We can explore that those waters and do it in a very careful way. Um, there's also a lot of Mormons out there who are Buddhists, and so Buddhism is really open ended because you don't have to necessarily believe in a specific Buddhist god, or you don't have to necessarily deny the divinity of Jesus Christ to be a Buddhist. Buddhism is more about the practices that you adopt and kind of following that eightfold path. It's more like a philosophy. Um, and I would say there's a lot of great things in Buddhism that we can all learn from. Now, again, there are some things about Buddhism that I would really disagree with, and maybe we'll go into those later. But like I said, wherever truth is, I think we can take hold of it and incorporate it into our belief system. And um, so the Book of Mormon comes out during this period, and then I, as far as I can tell, there's even little things in the Book of Mormon that sort of speak to that. Um, so I'll give you a few examples. I think the first example is with Lehi, right? Um, Lehi is traveling in the wilderness, and he's there with Nephi, he's there with Laman and Lemuel, and from the narrative you can kind of tell that Laman and Lemuel aren't, they're not the most spiritual people. They're not like God's chosen people. They're not going to be the next prophet. That's evident from the get go. And Lehi, the good father that he is, he's trying to sort of like encourage his boys to be the best that they can be. So one good example of this is, um, they're in the wilderness, and Lehi says, "Hey, I wish that thou were firm and upright like the mountains." And then he says to the other son, "Hey, I wish you were like this river flowing into an eternal, river of righteousness." And for me, that's really interesting because to one son, he's saying, "Hey, I need you to straighten up. I need you to become more firm, more upright, like this mountain, right? Um, I need you to tighten the bolts a bit." And to the other son, he's saying, "Hey, man, you're too rigid. You need to be more flexible. You need to just be your thinking needs to be a bit more adaptive, and it needs to flow more and be not so rigid." And so Laman and Lemuel, they're having like opposite problems. One is on one extreme and the other is on the other extreme. And then later in the text, Lehi has his famous dream, right? And in his dream, the thing that he's worried about in this dream is Laman and Lemuel again. And in the dream, he envisions. Well, first he's caught up in this wasteland, this wilderness, and there's fog and the mists of darkness, and he's disoriented and confused and probably a little scared. And then he sees this great and spacious building, right? Huge superstructure that you know that people are flocking to, and to me that's significant because um, why do people adopt rigid worldviews? They do it because the ambiguity and the uncertainty of of having a lack of structure is unbearable. Have you ever met someone that's indecisive? The thing that person wants the most is for someone to tell them what to do 24/7. You know, for them it's stressful to think it through and say, I'm going to make this decision. I hope it's the right decision. Um, and so, so there's all these people in the wilderness to avoid nature. They walk into this superstructure building. But the dream is saying no, neither of those are correct. You can't be in the wilderness and you can't be in the superstructure. There's this like middle path that you have to take, and that's the iron rod, and it takes you to the tree of life. Um, and so in that dream, you start to see the hints already, right? The hints of Taoism and maybe a little bit of Buddhism, but it's saying, hey, you got to take this middle path. You can't be on one end, on one extreme or the other extreme. You have to be in the middle. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at the figure of Jesus Christ in the New Testament, he is navigating um, this really rigid uh, and big predominant belief system. He's also confronting Rome, which is a superstructure, right? That's the Colosseum and the Roman Empire. But then he's also like introducing novel ideas to this community, and it's chaotic, and people are disoriented. People are saying, what is this Jesus guy talking about? That those who eat of this bread are eating my flesh. That's radical. And so Jesus is navigating these two spaces, this unfamiliar territory that's new, and then this like worn old superstructure, rigid, imposing structure that's his predominant religious tradition, and then also Rome. Um, and so, anyways, back to the dream. Uh, that's one of the takeaways you can get from Lehi's dream is, hey, you can't be too rigid and you can't be too loosey goosey like Laman and Lemuel. You have to find that happy medium, where there's just enough structure to get you to where you need to go, but just enough uncertainty that you can exercise faith and also not be like, things aren't overbearing. And then eventually you get to the tree of life. You partake of the fruit, and it's one of the most joyful experiences. Um, Later, Lehi's having these experiences, right? He's having this experience with his sons in person. Then he has his dream, and then later, all these ideas like they become explicit for Lehi. He says, "Hey, there's opposition in all things, and one thing can't exist without the other." And again, that sounds very Taoist to me. That these opposites exist, and Lehi gives his argument. He says, "Hey, if there was no such thing as sin or suffering, there would be no such thing as righteousness or joy." And he says, "Men are that they might have joy." And again, that word joy, very specific term, and you have to keep in mind that this is a translation. So the Book of Mormon is a translation. So whatever is being conveyed, Joseph Smith felt that joy was the correct word, and it is the correct word because it's not happiness that we're after. We're after joy, which Plato defines as that sense, that good feeling that you get after doing what's right, and that's different than happiness, because when you're happy or when you're having pleasure, you know a lot of things that are bad for you can cause you pleasure. You could be doing drugs. You can be addicted to pornography. You could be, um, maybe you're sadistic, right? And that's not good. But doing that which is right, that causes you joy, and that's what we're after. It has an ethical component to it. We're not just trying to be hedonistic, meat bags that are walking around avoiding pain. We're trying to do what's right and have joy. And that often gets confused with enjoyment. We're not here to have enjoyment. We're here to have joy. And so Lehi, going through these experiences, connects all these dots and then makes that argument. And that's, man, what that just shows you what a real and great prophet Lehi is. And so I think, again, I think there's a lot you can take away from the Book of Mormon. It hits the ground running as far as I can tell. And I highly encourage everyone to read it. So anyway, my goal is to make several of these videos about some of the insights I've had about the Book of Mormon. I think you guys will like them. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you later.